Hey everybody. Hi, it's Raghu, and I'm back with Mindrolling, and someone that many of you are familiar with, and we've been doing lovely offerings with, and Anthony Thogmartin, and Anthony's from Papadosio and his own solo act, EarthCry. Welcome, Anthony.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I think we have I've gotten some wonderful notes from my personal podcast producer, Ganesh Bray Miller, he and his wife are huge fans of yours forever. It's the only reason I know about you, actually, is through them. But just in the kind of casual back and forth, I know that there's we have some cross currents that are very interesting, So, a little bit about yourself in terms of how you really came. I mean, Anthony does everybody, if you don't know, phenomenal musician, producer, really knows technology, really is into what's going on with the environment. So you're a little bit of a Renaissance man. And how did this all come through? I'm sure at a very early age. But how did the jump happen to realize you can't just there is another level of reality that is not just listening to your mind and thoughts and emotions, and there is something to do about some of the predicaments we're in these days?
Absolutely. Well, how did it start? My mom told me I used to plug the speakers in backwards in her old receiver, because if you did that, the interference would get picked up in the mic, and I could record my own cassettes of myself talking or singing into the speaker. And then I could forwards or backwards, and that kind of got my head going. And then she would ask me questions. She'd be like, "What instrument is that, Anthony? What instrument is this?" And I was, 3 years old. And I really had fun picking out instruments, and listening became this thing. Like, listening was just, to me, I guess I didn't speak much when I was a kid. I
Really?
kind of worried. I just listened and was listening to all these different sounds. And my sisters and I used to record thunderstorms with our boombox, and we would have little microphones, and we would do commentary as if we were like news anchors, like saying, "Oh, that was a good one." And so I was really interested in recording the natural world. The natural world was amazing to me, and my parents did me a great service by taking me to national parks. And I think they did that because they had children's programs, and so they could get rid of us for a while, and we'd go into the woods and flip over rocks. And they, at an early age, they took us to the forest a lot. I mean, we're always going to, there was one Burr Oak National Park in the Wayne National Forest in Ohio. It was a beautiful spot. I guess, like, you could say that my entry to the here and now has always been related to the great outdoors and outside. And I've ever since have made it a habit, if I can, weekly, sometimes even bi-weekly, to leave all of this technology behind and just go with my friends as deep as we can get, and try to find the untouched, untapped place. And a good friend of mine that walks with us a lot tends to say, "Hey, we've been chatting it up a lot. Can we just take some silence and take all this in?" And so, that's where it all comes from. This connection that we all feel especially when we walk alone in the woods.
Yeah. We've been talking about that a lot, or I have been, with different people, around the healing properties of reconnecting with nature, and certainly the indigenous peoples that are around this country. So many different tribes. Boy, that's a wisdom and knowledge that we need to pay a lot more attention to. And
this area is amazing for First Nation. Like, this area,
in North Carolina, right?
Where I am, our house faces the Swannanoa River Valley, and it crosses the French Broad River. And these, of course, those are our names for these rivers. But I guess way back in the day, this conjunction of these two rivers is where they used to do these giant longboat races, and multiple different denominations of First Nation would come together, mostly Cherokee, and they would race these longboats. And so this was like a sporting kind of area. And, you know, these kinds of things, they open your mind up a little bit to realize just what the richness of the culture that must have happened in this valley. You start to get a different feeling when you walk around the ridges and you look down into the valleys, and you're like, man, this was, I mean, one of the most established First Nation cultures was just flourished here in the Southeast. And I try to take that into account and think about that and give that honor and really try to, you know, take it all in, maybe from that perspective, and what it would have been like to be alive at that time and to witness it in place, you know?
Yeah. So I know that the combination of, in terms of the kind of music that you make, that has a real proponent of consciousness, spirituality, whatever we want to call it. And you've talked about it. Maybe say a little bit. I think that's where we dissect a little. No, we come together. Talk a little bit about music and spirituality, what that means to you, and how it helps formulate the offerings that you're making.
Well, cool. I think this is a great way to tie it all together. I find myself getting very stale, idea-wise, if I can't find that silence, find that that inspiration that being in the great outdoors, or at least being in silence, can allow. And I am a huge proponent, and I think that you'll find that most musicians will say this if they're being honest, that we're more like translators, you know, like we're sitting by, you know, at the little throne beside the king, quickly scribing down, or the queen, scribing down what they're saying. And I think that music is like this great spirit of idea, and these ideas are soaring through the world, and we are picking them up every once in a while if we're lucky, and, you know, translating them so that people can hear them. And I don't, you'll find by and large that people will write the same music. This is the craziest thing. Like, my band will go on tour, and in the bus, someone will be whistling a tune on the other side of the bus, and I'll hear it. I'll be like, wait, I was just whistling that in my head, even though neither of us had heard the song in a couple weeks. And I think there's probably a lot of scientific reasons why this occurs, sure. But I mean, putting all that aside, I can't sit here and claim, you know, listen, if I was truly being honest, I can't say, listen to my latest record, listen to this, my thing, my this, my that. It just doesn't truly make sense. To be totally honest, it's just, I think the best musicians in the world are the best translators of what they hear in their mind's ear, if that even makes sense. You know, like what all these ideas are around, and we're just simply, we're lucky when we receive these. I remember receiving one of our bigger songs I heard in my head in the shower. Well, I was just taking a shower, and I was like, oh, this is really inconvenient. I really need to get this down. So I threw a towel around myself, ran over to the studio, and sang it into the mic so that I wouldn't forget the idea. And so it just doesn't feel totally honest for me to say that I'm sitting down and creating this amazing thing. It's not me necessarily that's creating it. It's everything that the earth has done leading up to this point created it. It could be a little bit of me, maybe a little bit of me is in there, but, you know, 99% of it is just what the earth is doing. Or at least that's my own personal take on it. I don't want to just say that this is how the world works, but my personal experience has pointed to that. And in that, so in that, I've found every ounce of spirituality that I've ever found in my life can be encapsulated in that. I believe that it's not isolated to just music, that music is one of those things, but every single thing, every way we express ourselves is a re-expression of what's already happening. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of it as a funnel, and you can actually see it if you go to a live thing. A lot of times you can see the thing being funneled from the mystery, let's just call it that, in through this person. I mean, it's what, the best example in my life is Ram Dass. And you know, sorry everybody for telling these stories the millionth time, But, you know, Ram Dass I got captured just like everybody with psychedelics and Be Here Now. Although the Be Here Now wasn't out then, the talks that made that up, it was all the same. And then I got to India to meet, because all I wanted to do was meet his guru. And I did. And as soon as he opened the door and I felt him, I realized, oh my God, that's what Ram Dass was about. Had nothing to do with him whatsoever. It was such a transparent thing of someone being a funnel, and just this was pouring through. It was an indelible memory, of course. And so I had this experience that really points to the way in which spirituality and music really become one. And it was I was very much into jazz at a very early age, and somehow somebody, an older person, must have been, I can't remember who it was, but they got me into a club, right? You know, that served alcohol. I was only I couldn't have been more than 16, maybe 17, and alcohol, where I was from in Montreal, Quebec, was I think 21. So, but I did get in there, and there was John Coltrane and his quartet, Jimmy Garrison on bass, McCoy Tyner on piano, Elvin Jones on drums. And yeah, he was so phenomenal. Elvin Jones was the coolest person I ever encountered in my entire life. He lit a cigarette and he smoked that thing down to the filter without ever touching it, and played like the most complex patterns and the timing. I mean, he was extraordinary. I'll never forget that. Anyhow, Coltrane started playing this song, My Favorite Things, Rodgers and Hammerstein, you know, which was a well-known song. And he played soprano, sax, and although I had had experiences before where I had gone out of my body as a child, which I never told anybody, and I never really realized it until I went to India and had the same experience. But in this particular evening, and Coltrane just went into just the first few notes. I don't know why, what, how. I just snapped right into a whole other plane of consciousness that was so removed from me land, you know. I mean, you talked before about songs coming to you, material inspiration and so on, and you'd hesitate to say that you have anything to do with it. I would disagree a little bit, because it's all one super connected thing that we're in, and you as an individual soul are part of that. I am, and just even sitting there with Coltrane, you know, the audience is part of it as well. And that was a seminal event for me, because my love for music was so great, and I've been involved in music my entire life, one way or the other. I mean, sometimes not so much professionally, but certainly like going to India and getting the idea that we could actually offer our most inner perfection to the divine through what's called kirtan. And so that was like the kickoff of the game, as far as I was concerned. And the idea of realization of how music and spirituality really talk about all one. I mean, at some point, there's no dividing line. That's why they say, actually, that in India, this is called the Kali Yuga, the age of destruction of ignorance, but destruction on a broader level that we're seeing right now. And they say, don't bother intellectual pursuits, Gyan Yoga it's called. Just repeat the name, and that's all you need. And so that's what, you know, of course, all the Hare Krishna people going around the airports and so on saying that thing. Of course, it's a little bit too exclusive, perhaps, that this is the only thing and there is no such thing, but certainly efficacious because of music. right? All of this, the mantra is driven, or it's like a medicine that you're not feeling because the music and the beat is just absolutely enveloping you. So you don't even have to know anything. What Ram, Sita Ram, whatever it is, you don't have to know anything. And it's so easy, especially, it's easy for anybody, but in the West, and if you're young, this is something that you gravitate towards no matter what. And so the power of music and its ultimate, it is completely indivisible from spirit. That's just the truth, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Which is, by the way, how I met Anthony, ultimately because of the Ram Dass Soul and Music series, and which we did the end of last summer and early fall, and Papadosio was part of it, and Anthony is going to take part because we're starting it up again on March 19th, everybody, so join us. It's Friday night, and you will enjoy. And also we're doing, this is a good idea. We're doing a compilation of some of the song, I think a lot of the songs that were people, a selection from each person, each artist that performed. And Papadosio's contribution is called Your Game is Clean. I want to talk about that. But I think I can't talk to an artist, a musician, without playing something. It's like, what do we, So we can't play the whole song because it's long, but we're going to play a part of it, and we're going to do it right now. Your game is clean.
So, what you are facing as you start to play with these planes of consciousness, these planes of reality, is that you are dealing with paradoxes that you must incorporate into your being. Because to be an impeccable warrior means that you are going to start to live simultaneously on many planes of reality, not go back and forth from one to the other. And there becomes the stinker in social action. Because for me to go into the plane of reality where I see that we are all one, and then come back into my separateness as an American where I am part of 6% of the population using 40% of the natural resources, and dealing with the fact that somebody is blind in India for want of an operation that costs $5, and that I'm going to use my next $5 to go to the movie. If it was my father, I wouldn't, because he's part of my phenomenological self. If it is my cousin, it isn't, but somehow that person in India is them when I'm here, but when I'm one, it's us. And the interesting question is, when you bring it all together, how do you live on this plane as if we are all us? That's what you start to do as an impeccable warrior. Your game is clean across levels of reality. Your game is clean across levels of reality.
There you go. Hey, talk about your game is clean. Okay, what does that mean to you? I mean, I know it's picked up from Ram Dass, right?
Sure. Well, that he coined, well, at least in his talk, coined the phrase because, and when choosing these quotes, we kind of created them before we played, and everything that you just heard, as well as everything that Papadosio thus far has contributed to the series, was improvised. So what was interesting is that, we would maybe be going one direction with the music. We would listen and something would be said, or some series of things would be said. And all of a sudden, I think we would be like, well, wait, I think we need to do this now because that's what the lyrics did. So, but when you have a ship of improvising musicians, you could kind of think of it as like a boat, and everyone gets the cue. Oh, we got to change the sail. You know what I mean? Like we got to go starboard side because that's what the lyrics are doing. So your game is clean was referring to your impeccability. You know what I mean? And your ability to rise up in in your impeccability. And so we were like, okay, when you listen to what happens in the song, it kind of gets a little bit more syncopated, and there's less held out notes. And I think in my head, at least, I was thinking, okay, clean. What is clean? And I started just trying to like pluck out a little plucky sounds instead of making long sustained notes. That was at least what was coming through for me. But then again, that's the beauty of playing with 4 other musicians, is that like, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? So I found it refreshing and fun. The entire project was refreshing and fun because it was improvised in the moment. And it's a little terrifying because for us, we have on nights and off nights whenever we do the improvised thing. And some days it's like, bam, bam, bam. It's hitting like, it's great every time. And other times it's like, like we could have done better. Honestly, in that case, that day, everything was firing on all the right cylinders. And we were just so happy with the whole.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah. Which leads me to say, of course, you with Papadosio actually are working on an album that's using more of Ram Dass's material, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, at this moment, we have recorded a pretty good amount of material, and we are some of it we really like, some of it we want to redo, but we did it all live. So our big questions now are how to approach this. Do we want to supplement this with maybe a more drone style or a couple drone style songs? Do we want to bring anybody else in on this, like some of our friends around town that play? We haven't like multi-tracked anything. We've done this all like on the spot, and there's something really raw and fun about that. But now we're kind of looking at this from a different angle, being like, okay, so we could do other things with this too. So we're bringing in a bunch of different ideas and trying to kind of hone in on one singular decision. This time in our lives, we have an abundance of time because we're not on the road all the time. So we don't feel any need to, do anything specific or rush anything. It feels like it's a natural process of, okay, how can we rise to this occasion in a way that like really honors, the words that are being said and the opportunity and the honor that we feel, being asked to do this project. So,
So how does Ram Dass even come into all of this for you and the band? Well, for you particularly, obviously.
I was one of those kids that picked up Be Here Now and, had a pretty psychedelic middle, I guess the middle of my life, around 18 to like 30, that area. I was heavily experimenting, and I have since that time kind of refocused my personal journeys to less entheogens and more silence and more recently breathing techniques and breath work in general has been really good for me. But at that time in my life, I was listening to all the late greats, Alan Watts and all these incredible speakers, including Ram Dass. And I just, it seemed like music was being made in those talks that I listened to. And I would just, early YouTube was some of the best places because people would just upload rare talks from these guys. And you could just get so deep with that. I was also listening to like Terrence McKenna, of course, and all the other, all of those guys. And I realized that what I was trying to say musically, or what I wanted as an artist to put forward, was the places that listening to those talks brought me. And so lyrically, I wanted to distill down some of those things. And how we actually met is you had discovered that we had used some of Ram Dass's first tune on our first record, because that's such a prime example of he was speaking to otherization, the act of saying I'm on this side and you're on that side, and he always speaks to otherization, and I've always enjoyed that aspect of what he would bring to the table. But this specific quote, there is no they, there's no other, it's all one, really is what I wanted to bring forward lyrically in the song The Plug. And it's such a prime example of what I'm talking about, because it was that song was heavily influenced by the vocal sample before it was even a song. And then it was the idea of trying to wrap this song idea around that quote. It doesn't always go that way. Most of the time, it's like, I got a riff. Okay, that riff would go maybe well with this vowel sound, and it comes naturally that way. This was more like it was actually one of the last songs we wrote on the record. We just felt it was a strong song, so we put it first. You know what I mean? So and then you had reached out and you're like, hey, we think this is great. We want to know more about you guys. And and that's cool how that all came together. I get that's our very first song that we put out. So
really?
Yeah. It's the
first. As Papadosio? Wow. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. That's pretty amazing, actually. Oh. So what in the heck is it like? I mean, how many members are in Papadosio?
It's 5.
5? 5, right. And it's an equal democratic process, right?
Yeah. It's a long process, and it's interesting, our relationships and how you have to, when collaborating with 5 people, it's very simple by yourself to know exactly what you're doing. When you have 5 people, you have 5 people that are trying to come together and represent their experience with what they're hearing, right? And that's why you give people these specific these little fun roles that we play. Like, I'm the drummer, I'm the bass player, I'm the guitar player, because you can kind of get that thing and translate it through your instrument, and harmony can usually occur in that way because people aren't stepping on each other's frequency areas, right? The bass is low, the guitar is high, the singing is higher, the drums are all around everything, and they don't have notes. But what's interesting about all that is, like I was saying before earlier, when somebody's whistling something and then I'm like, I had that in my head. We have, over the years, these 15 years now being together, we have over the years noticed that we're on this wavelength more than we aren't, because of the act of practicing together. We're in training together. We're in training our minds to react a specific way to certain sonic cues. You know what I mean? So maybe on a physiological level, that's what's going on. But also, I think on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, on a a brotherhood level, we have in some way connected in ways that I think that it would take us thousands of years to be able to discover what these other things are. You know what I mean? And maybe we don't even have to put words on it. Maybe it's just that magical and wonderful. But I feel like even if we spend weeks apart, we'll come together and it'll still work. It's almost like riding a bicycle. Like, we're really never going to forget how to jam together. Will we be rusty? Will we be not as good? Will we have off nights? Of course. But, because we've taken we've ridden the bike so many times now, it's like second nature to connect with each other.
At the same time, though, you have 5 different minds, 5 different me perspectives. And there has to be moments where, gee, I think that riff is right. You're not, forget about it. Okay. This is something that there's got to be that going on as well. And the only way that I've found in terms of collaborating with people, where at its best, at its highest level, is the understanding we are all, whatever we are doing is perfect for us to realize how caught we are or aren't, and to allow it to transform through mindfulness. So I have to assume, because you guys, and certainly ethnogens help to understand at least the different planes of consciousness, so that you're not feeling like what you think is real. You're not feeling like your story is a story that you're going to hold on to for the rest of your life. So is that what's going on too with the guys in Papadosio?
We've definitely, well, to speak to the first point, yeah, we of course have definitely had very large disagreements, to the degree that
no,
it wouldn't be right to call them friends. It would be much more right to call them brothers, because friends, they can get in disagreements, but they don't have the kind of like fights that brothers do. Brothers have real fights, big time, like, well, I think this, I think that. And yeah, we've all been in that situation where we get caught up in the me but my thing, my this, my that, but I think by and large, what we've discovered is that what we create together, when we give the other person, if someone's really feeling strongly about something, that also means that they're kind of stepping up into like maybe the role of leadership, and that energy is trying to happen through them. So we should hear that idea out. And what we come up with together as a team always is probably going to be a much better thing than what, us individually would have come up with,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So there's, I think is this the newest album, Identity Mitosis?
Yeah, that's the newest EarthCry album, my newest solo thing. Yeah.
And is that out yet?
It is. It's an episodic animated video series on YouTube. And it's pretty interesting. I really enjoy what people project as what could potentially happen in the future. And so I like to read futuretimeline.net is a great place to find what different, sci-fi authors and scientists come up with what might happen, all based on, present data and stuff. And so I kind of imagined what would happen if there's all the information in Earth is distilled into these little AI robots. And the only thing that survives the time of humans and the time of everything is this little AI robot. And they all left planet Earth except for one of them. And one of them stays here. And then the Earth goes through its extinction period, regrows everything. So 7 million years is about the average that it takes for Earth to rebound whenever there's a mass extinction period. So this takes place, 7 million years in the future. And this little AI turns back on and meets a being that is basically kind of representative of the Earth. And so the robot is representing this very fractional thinking, rational, logical, kind of like scared and always on guard kind of like mentality. And then the being that it's talking to is representing this symbiotic, super connected perspective. And they have conversations about different topics. And each one of those topics I turned into a song. And each one of those songs, it has like a little dialogue you can read at the bottom of the screen where they're kind of like talking about from their perspective. Well, I think this, I think that. And it's a really interesting, I think so. I hope some other people find it interesting, but it's this little like interplay between these two beings. And I don't want to give away anything if anyone wants to watch it, but they come together. And our first album as a band is called McGreenery. And it's kind of like a play on machinery and greenery, like thinking of like the world as like this interplay between technology and nature, and my own life being this thing where I'm really highly, engaged in all this technology of music. But then as much as I can, get out into nature where there's nothing like that. I just like artistically, that's the kind of like, I guess, modus operandi I operate out of. That's where you'll find me, is in the folds between, the completely raw, original, natural world and then technology. And so that's what I'm trying to bring forward with that.
Oh, that's so good. By the way, everybody, we, of course, in the show notes on BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling, you will be able to be connected to Anthony's EarthCry album, Identity Mitosis. What's mitosis mean?
Mitosis is when a cell splits.
Mitosis.
I mean, like the whole naming of this was that the AI is extremely fractionalized, whereas the Earth being has always been like, well, you're part of me. Like talking to this little AI, you're part of me. You're part of me. The being always refers to the AI as little seed, because he's trying to explain to the AI that you're actually a planet seed. You know what I mean? And you have all the information and everything you could ever need information wise to go out into the universe and start another planet and do all this stuff. Like, I think of the Earth's extinction period that we're living through right now. I think of it as sort of like, when you see a plant grow, it turns into a flower and then it wilts because it's devoting all of its energy to create seeds. I think that the overarching story that we tell about our time right now is this horrible, dark kind of situation. But, intelligence and humanity has to mature in some way. And any plant you see in nature that is even the annual plants that come back every year, they go to seed and they devote all of their energy to that. And so if you could zoom out and look at the earth from this perspective, just another perspective, you could look at it as the earth is going to seed, and the seed that it's creating is this hyper, condensed amount of information and art and everything that humans have come up with, for better or for worse. It's just a little perspective I enjoy.
That's great. Are we going to have to wait 7 million years, though?
Maybe we'll get it right this time. I feel like that's what the Earth is trying to do. Every time this happens, we think there's been 6 mass extinction periods, but maybe there's been 500 million, and this is just another one, and it's making an attempt yet again to create seeds and shoot them off. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's what this is.
Yeah. You have a deep connection too, and not just. You have been active with matters around ecology and environment. Maybe say a little bit about that, what that means to you, and as far as I'm seeing it, your generation, next generation, in terms of coming to grips with what is going on, which is probably the most important. I mean, it's all locked in, actually, and what I mean is it's extraordinary and an extraordinary moment that needs to be paid a bunch of attention. And it's starting to happen, but of course there's tremendous backlash and denial going on in our world. And at the same time, you can't leave out, in my mind, and I did a podcast with some people who are activists around the environment. And they wrote a book called Full Ecology, which will be on one of the Mindrollings coming up, I think. But they really dug into the fact that we have to change our polarized relationship inside ourselves if we are to cut through the polarization that we are creating with everything around us. The way that we treat, I mean, down to the throwing the plastic thing out without even thinking, not knowing where it's going, not even, just complete lack of awareness that we all do. All of us are doing all the time. And to be able to, at the same time, work on that polarization as we're hopefully thinking about what we can do as individuals, even in the smallest way, to contribute to stopping the madness that's going on. Yeah.
I mean, I really like that perspective that tries to tie in the violence that we experience on the outside toward the environment or to each other, that is all coming from the same place. And if people can really, I believe that if people can really wrap their understanding around that, then we've finally started to move somewhere. Like, for example, we live in a polarized, especially America right now is a very polarized country. And I've noticed that entering into any conversation on a hot topic, that if you don't go into that conversation with an open ear right off the bat, and it becomes this, instead of becoming this like, well, I heard this, well, I heard that. If you don't come in with an open ear, you don't give that other person that open ear first, they will never hear you. So what's the point in me going over to that mountain and standing on top of it and claiming what I know to be true without lending my ear to somebody else? If I truly want to change the world, I mean, it's almost like people want to experience the feeling of being correct or experience their own personal righteousness more than they actually want to, move society into a better place or move human culture or move the earth into a more sustainable future. And so I truly believe and 100% agree that sustainability, in a lot of ways, environmentally sustainability, starts with hearing out why people aren't on board. And that is really hard, I think, for a lot of people to understand, And it's hard to wrap your mind around it because it seems like such a step backwards, but to open your heart to the concerns, because I truly believe that everybody on planet Earth has, I mean, it's almost like you can't find an antagonist. Everyone in their own mind is the protagonist of their life story. I mean, I'm sure even some of the most heinous, people on Earth that have ever walked the Earth, in their own minds, they were the protagonist. So you have to, if you expect to totally upend someone's entire like protagonist timeline story from A to Z, you got to hear them first. And to truly hear them and be willing to be wrong in some regards, because it's where we come together that change happens, not where we just, I got this, I got that, I believe this, I believe that. It doesn't do anything. It's just, this.
Yeah. I go back to what you said when I asked you how this all kind of evolved for you from a young age and how you listen. You did a lot of listening. You probably became more of an expert than most people because of that proclivity to listen and listen to the environment. And then I'm sure it transferred into listening to people around you and being open. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. And that's such a difficult path to be. I mean, that is somebody, I forget, a French writer, I think, said, the most generous act that you can perform for another person is giving them 100% attention. Mm. Right? And we walk around, how many times, we can all recognize how somebody is engaging us, and then we're out to lunch, eyeballs going left and right, thoughts with yeah. It's very difficult which is why, I tell the story of Ram Dass a billion times. When I first met him, he gave me that complete 1,000,000,000% attention. And there was no Richard or Ram Dass there. That he became nobody in that movie, which refers to the movie that we did with him. And in that moment, there was just surrounding me. You surround that person that you're engaging with complete projection of a trusting, warm body of water that you can completely let go. And that's what we can offer. Now, none of that can happen until you do that with yourself, right? Start with yourself. And love oneself, be kind to oneself, have compassion with oneself. And then I think you have a chance to listen to other people and not being crazy judgmental. And then we have a chance to engage with all the primal events of our lifetime, and right at the very top certainly is the environment.
Mm-hmm. I think we live in a time of convergent crises, and I think an immediate reaction could be to be sad and worried and afraid, and I think that those are all extremely understandable reactions, and there's a place for them too. They're indicators of the need to change and transform, of course. But I think that we can also look at them and look at human history and look at the fact that, I don't have talons. I don't have huge muscles. We have no real advantage, evolutionarily, other than that we have each other, and we are social creatures. And the only reason humans have survived all this time is because we are adaptable and we understand what it means to change. So when we look at the world and it looks like this big, it can't change, humans don't change, human nature is human nature. It's like, well, actually, if you're honest and you take a look at what we've done over these millennia, we have changed dramatically, and how we organize society has changed so dramatically. And it's almost like for some reason, we decide we want to learn the hard way. But when the climate refugees start coming into America, when climate refugee, I think, is going to be one of the biggest terms in the next, 20 or 30 years, when we actually have to see the result of the fruit, the that we've sown, we will change. And that sometimes that's what it takes. So I think there are other ways to look at this. I'm not one of those people that says, well, I should just sit around and do nothing now because, it's all going to happen anyway. But I do think that that's definitely a big part of it. And what I can bring to the table and what you can bring to the table and what everybody can bring to the table is much bigger than that. But we will experience these things. And I think that we will find our way through it as we always have, and we'll be better for it. Nothing's going to solidify a sustainable future as much as the necessity for a sustainable future, And so the smart people are seeing it now, but eventually all of our systems will be designed around it because we have no other way. We have no other choice.
Yeah, I completely agree around the reality that we are so interconnected with each other, and the more that we come to realize that connection is what is going to help us transform all of this great meeting place of very, very tough events that are going on right now. Boy, when you start to think of them, it's like staggering with the pandemic and the political polarization and the huge gap between those with wealth and those without it, and the environment and so on. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. But Thich Nhat Hanh, Thich Nhat Hanh is? Yeah. So he has a beautiful little aphorism for now. He said the next Buddha is the Sangha, the satsang, the community. Oh. And yeah, and isn't that so? Isn't that so, right? And that's something great to fall back on in one's mind, and gives courage to be able to take the next step forward. Anthony, I got these lyrics from Ganesh, and from a song that you wrote with Papadosio. I don't know who wrote All I Knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the second record. Yeah.
And who did? Somebody writes? I mean, you're really collaborative on all this stuff. I know that.
I wrote that song and the lyrics mainly. There was definitely other musical contributions in that tune, but I wrote the lyrics and the main riffs, if you will.
Okay, I just want to read from it because it's just great. I wasn't born with a violent heart. I didn't know what my race was. I didn't need to kill anyone. All that I knew was love. I wasn't born with a jealous heart. I didn't know what I deserved, and I didn't need to own anything. All that I knew was love. I wasn't born with an ego. I didn't know what my name was. I didn't need to be anyone. All that I knew was love. I love this. This is so. I mean, just think, it is so relatable for everybody. That you start to realize, yes, you do need to develop an ego to go through life. It just doesn't need to be the master. It's much better if it's the servant, as Ram Dass used to say. But the reality of that perfection, and everyone can see it in any baby. If you've ever been, and most of us have been with a newborn, and you see that the wonder and the joy and the bliss and all of it is there. And so is a body, because sometimes it's uncomfortable, even taking a poop, so you cry. But all of that wonder and joy, then the causes and conditions come in as soon as you know your name. That puts you as a separate individual, and then you're forever, a whole life, after developing a solid ego, shall we say, you spend the rest of your life becoming nobody, as Ram Dass used to say. And so I love it. beautiful lyrics, man. Really.
That the lyrics are just trying to point to, of course, you need an ego to really even just to survive, because you have to remember to eat and and stay warm and all the other things, of course. But yeah, the lyrics are just trying to point to that all the things that we do that we coin as evil or bad behavior are all learned things. They're things that we learn. We learn to do them. They're things that we instruct. And if you want to zoom out with that as far as you can go with it, you can learn other ways to interact with each other. And that was what that song was kind of trying to point to.
Mm. How old were you when you wrote that? May I ask?
I was probably 22 or 23 or something.
Jeez. That's pretty wise stuff for a 22-year-old. It's great, man.
But me.
Wow. Yeah, right. We go back to the reality. Now, well, we're getting close to the end, but I did want to highlight something that I really appreciate that you do, which is the teaching that you do, musical seva, and I think it's called Seed to Stage Academy. Tell us a little bit about that. I think there's many people who are listening that are either musicians or wanting to delve more into that area of their lives. And so, yeah, please introduce that.
Well, it all started with the joy of making music and I feel relatively free that if I hear a sound in my head, I can make it happen. And it's a gift. It is such a gift that I want to keep giving that gift. And I've found a new joy, and that's a new joy in teaching. And so what I originally wanted to do was create an education-based festival where a week of instruction, you could go and have a couple master classes and some other things. And then on the weekend, instead of you going to a show where all these known artists are going to play, it's the students performing what they've learned throughout the week. And their friends and parents can show up, and it's it's not like this giant festival, but it's like this, just the celebration of knowledge. And it never got to that point, because what happened was, the coronavirus hit, and I was finally expanding the Seed to Stage Academy, which was the musical end of it. I had 2 cities lined up. It was here in Asheville and one in Denver, and everything was going really well. And then, all that happened. So where I was at is I was like, okay, how can I still move forward with this, the joy of teaching? And so yeah, I started a YouTube channel teaching musical software, and then now it's become an online course that you can take. There's multiple online courses you can take for learning how to get the music that's in your head playing out of speakers, and so that's what I wanted to bring to the table. My ultimate vision still remains the same. I really like the idea of maybe a school or something like that. It may be a pipe dream. It may be something that I'm, I'll actually be able to do. But for now, yeah, I'm just teaching everything that I've learned, trying not to hold back at all and just giving it all out. My YouTube channel, it's crazy. I think that there's a big need for information that's, sound and organized into specific places you can go. And so my YouTube channel it's just crazy. There's 55,000 people that all think that I have something decent to offer. And
oh, wow.
So yeah, education is definitely a new thing for me. I guess the last 5 years or so, I've really went down that path. But I've experienced all the joys that a musician could ever want to experience, and played on festivals, Red Rocks, and all that other stuff. And I want to, instead of just hoard all this that I've learned, why not just give it back out? It's fun,
That's terrific, Anthony. Love it. It's I guess that's part of the reason why we're joining forces here, is how well we see eye to eye about all of this. And by the way, again, Anthony will be premiering his own solo work on Ramdas Soul Land, streaming out to every platform on Friday, March 19th. So we really look forward to that. That's going to be terrific. And again, everybody, Anthony will give me all the links, or give us all the links, and we'll make sure they're all up there so you can go and I want to watch that series you talked about the little AI guy. That's cool. So we're going to have all of that, and links to the music, and links to what Papadosio did last fall for the Ram Dass Whole Land series. So thank you. Thanks, Anthony, for being here and being who you are. It's, it's very inspiring. I say this, and I have said this sometimes. So there's so many similarities to me coming up, late 60s, early 70s, and what I feel is going on now with next generation, except for, there's a lot of, we are both of these cultures driven by enormous pushback from, shall we say, not so delightful forces. And many of them, of course, through karma and through generational stuff, all the way, we haven't even talked about racial justice and how that's such a part of what we're waking up to in a way I don't think we've woken up to it quite this way before. And it's just an extraordinary time. And to be able to share what you're sharing in these times, especially through music, is so invaluable. And we're happy to be able to help present it, and just the kind of work that you've been doing with this band and solo and everything else. I don't want to gush too much, but it is pretty great, and it's not what we used to do back in the day. We were more focused on me. I'm going to get more spiritual, or I'm going to get deliverance. Now I've realized, wow, you can get more kind, compassionate, loving, but some of us, many of us, and myself included, miss the boat on, wait a minute, at the same time, we can be adding a social voice. We can be adding an environmental voice. And I don't think we got that quite the way that you get it from this generation. So thank you.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody, we'll see you next week on Mindrolling. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/Mindrolling and check out all of this growing podcasts that we have. Mirabai Bush just joined us and had a great talk with John Densmore. By the way, you would like to hear that talk, Anthony. And also, Ram Dass, we did a whole thing, and it came out a few weeks ago, Ram Dass and Alan Watts, back and forth around the same kind of theme. That was a delight. So some great stuff there. Check it out, and we'll see you next week.